Hi everyone, my name is Tyler and I'm here to help you get into your new 40k army. 40k as a hobby can be very expensive to get into, but my goal with this series is to help you get a full army going without having to break the bank. Before we dive into the list, let's talk about some basic rules that we're going to be using for the list building process here. Our first goal is going to be to keep it affordable and utilize box deals. For everything that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at it from an MSRP value from Games Workshop themselves. Now, I don't recommend buying everything MSRP from Games Workshop. Often, local hobby stores, eBay, Amazon, things of that nature will have much better deals for the kits that I'm about to show you. Our second goal is that we're going to be making the list in steps, starting at 500 points and working our way up to 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and 2,000 points. Our third rule is we're going to be avoiding Forge World and Finecast. Many Forge World models are often very pricey for the points that they provide you on the table, and the resin used can be hard to work with, especially for beginners. As far as Finecast goes, I just don't think that they're quite as high quality as the plastic models that you can get otherwise. Our fourth goal is to aim to make lists with decent competitive viability. We're going to be trying to make lists that can do well at casual tournaments, in your games with friends, or maybe even get you some wins at major tournaments. Our fifth and final rule is the most important one. Just because I don't mention a model in my list, it doesn't mean that it isn't good. The most important thing that you can do is collect models that you think are cool. There's an entire side of the hobby that has nothing to do with playing, and if you don't like the models you're painting and building, you're not going to get the most out of this hobby. Today, we're going to be talking about the Dark Eldar, also known as the Drukhari. The Drukhari are the edgiest of the edgy factions in Warhammer 40k, and also the most evil faction in a universe of nothing but bad guys. They are a group of space elves who sustain their lives through the torture of other living beings. It really is not an exaggeration to say that the worst fate you can possibly experience in Warhammer 40k is being a prisoner of war to a Drukhari. You can think of the Drukhari as space pirates living in the city-state of Comarog, which exists in the Webway. They're kind of equivalent to the Warp. There is no honor among thieves between the Drukhari. They are mercenaries to their core. They will betray you in a second if they think it will advance their own prospects in life. Most of these Drukhari fall into one of three sub-factions on the tabletop. You will have the Cabals, who act like a military force for Comarog. You have the Witch Cults, who are gladiators and assassins fighting with great finesse. And finally, you have the Homunculi, who are master torturers who bend the flesh of their victims into giant hulking monstrosities. So why should you give in to your primal urges and join the Drukhari? Well, as an army, they are incredibly mobile. They hit very hard. They have a lot of cheap units on the battlefield, and they play secondary missions very well because of their speed and ability to just throw away units without it being too much of an investment for their total army points. They also have a great range of stratagems. You will be sad almost every single game that you play because you don't have infinite CP to spend on all of the amazing stratagems, and you have to make hard choices all the time. You can stack tons of buffs to reach crazy potential with your army, between getting lots of extra AP, extra strength, fights first, rerolls, and all of those nice little bonuses. And as far as collecting, they have a great combat patrol between the extra Cabalite models that you can take off of the boats instead of having them attached onto it, and everything inside of the combat patrol being really good on the tabletop. Past that, they have some amazing kit bash potential, so you can really make this army your own. Anything from any other game that has elves or edgy character design will fit great in here. If it is spiky, if it has whips, if it has pointy ears, congratulations, it's a great Drukhari proxy. But there are some reasons why you should have hopped on the last Craft World out of here and not joined the Drukhari. For starters, their skin is made of paper and their bones are made of glass. Every time someone sneezes in their general direction, they will fall down with broken bodies. All of that speed and all of that damage has to have a cost somewhere, and unfortunately, it is their toughness. Because of this lack of toughness, they can really struggle to hold primary objectives. It's not that hard to push Drukhari off of something. There might be a lot of bodies on there, but none of those bodies are going to live up to any kind of actual threat. They're also an army that wants to play a very trade-heavy style. You have all of these fast-moving and hard-hitting and cheap units which want to go into more expensive units on your opponent's side and trade up in points so that you are just getting value out of every single combat. The problem is that these armies can be very difficult to play, especially for new players. There's also some fairly limited build options to the army. Your choices pretty much boil down to spam transports, spam dark lances, or spam both at the same time. And yes, you're going to have things going into those transports, and there might be a fringe build here or there that can get away with something else, but at least for now, you're kind of stuck in what you want to be doing. There are also a lot of very old models and a lot of out-of-cell models, which means that kit bashing, as much as it's a pro, is also kind of mandatory. If it's something you don't want to do and it's something you aren't comfortable with, this might be a hard army for you to get into. On top of that, if you don't kit bash, there's some pretty poor pricing across the army. The extra models inside of some of these full units are where you can save a lot of your money, but otherwise, Drukhari are really expensive. They're right up there with Sisters of Battle. Given that they have the three very different sub-factions between the Covens, the Cabal, and the Homunculi, if you don't like most of the range, you might not be happy with the army in the long run. It's not uncommon for this army to be very Witch-heavy, or very Homunculus-heavy, or very Cabal-heavy. And so if you don't like at least 2/3 of that range, I'd say you probably want to skip this army. Because it is an army as well that has all of these required proxies in a lot of cases, it can really heavily rely on a lot of 3D printing, as certain kits that are popular are just simply not in stock and are no longer being printed. And finally, building Drukhari models is very lore accurate, because you are going to get stabbed under your fingernails constantly by all the pointy bits. The models are also kind of prone to break because they have so many narrow, spiky parts all over their body, so you're going to be needing to bring a lot of glue with you when you go to events. The Drukhari army rule is power from pain. At the start of the battle, every time you destroy an enemy unit, and every time an enemy unit fails a battle shock, you are going to generate pain tokens. These pain tokens can be used to either make it so that your movement and charge are better, or to make it so that your shooting and fighting are better. Today we're only going to be looking at the Sky Splinter Assault Detachment for Drukhari. Their detachment rule is Reign of Cruelty. Every time a Drukhari unit disembarks from a transport, that unit's ranged weapons have Ignores Cover, and its melee weapons have Lance, which means that the melee attacks will be +1 to wound. Because Drukhari are such a transport-heavy army, this rule goes so nicely with what you want to do already with Drukhari. This should be your default detachment that you go into when you play. For this video, I really wanted to try to get 3 different lists together that would use varying amounts of combat patrols. Unfortunately, I ran into a problem when trying to make the one combat patrol list where the final price just wound up being $200 to $250 above what the other 2 were. Because of that, we're not going to be working with 3 lists. Instead, I just have 2 for you today. Both of these lists are going to start off the exact same way, with us going and picking up 1 combat patrol for Drukhari. The important thing to note about the combat patrol for Drukhari is that it has a lot more models in it than it might initially say. While it has 18 miniatures in it, if you take the extra Cabalite warriors that are on the Raider and the Ravager off, it winds up being much closer to 28 models. That means that you actually kind of get away with this being almost 600 points of combat patrol. When we look at what that means for the list, it means that we're going to be having the Archon with a Blast Pistol and Spiteful Raider. We're going to be having 2 10-man Cabalite Warrior units with all the fixings that we can give them. We're going to be having 1 Ravager with 3 Dark Lances, and we're going to be having 1 Raider with a Dark Lance. I would have liked to have been able to include the Incubi in this list, but unfortunately the points for the Incubi are just a little bit awkward, and it winds up leaving us pretty short of 500. By having the second Cabalite Warrior unit in there, we actually get to 500 on the dot. The other thing to note is that since the Cabalite Warriors that are coming off of the boat are not going to have an actual kit, and you're going to be using the leftover weapons from the regular Cabalite Warriors, if you're playing with an opponent who is a stickler for special weapons being what you see is what you get, you'll just have to run them with their default loadouts. At 1,000 points, it's going to look pretty simple. We're going to take that first combat patrol, we're going to slam the second combat patrol right on top of it. Just get both of them out of the way right away. This time around, we don't actually need to run all 4 units of Kabalite Warriors in order to max out our points. Instead, we can actually bring in one of the 2 units of Incubi that we have, the leader having Demiclaves. Everything else is going to be basically the exact same, except we're switching around the enhancements on the Archons. The most important enhancement, in my opinion, is the Nightmare Shroud. Being able to prevent Overwatch being fired on your Drukhari is going to be very, very important. Given how fragile they are, if they were to get hit by any kind of flame or Overwatch, that unit's probably just dead. So telling your opponent, no, you can't stop my charge, is going to just get you so much value. At 1,500 points is where we're going to see our first major deviation. What we're going to be doing for this first style is picking up 3 boxes of Scourges, then we're going to pick up 2 boxes of Venoms, and then we're either going to pick up some boxes of Tree Revenants from Age of Sigmar, or we're going to be picking up a box of Namarti Thralls from Age of Sigmar. These are going to be our stand-in for Mandrakes. Now, you can very easily go with either one. I personally recommend the Namarti Thralls because you get 10 for 60 instead of 5 for 55, which means that you would wind up spending $110 as opposed to 60. But the Tree Revenants, if you do like them, are a very nice alternative, especially if you go and you paint the tree details that they have as either bone or metal spikes. So for this list, when we're looking at it at the 1,500 points, the Archons are the same. We're only going to be running 2 10-man Kabalite Warrior units, so you don't have to use any of the extra ones we got off of the boats. But we're going to be using 2 units of Incubi, both with the Demiclaves on the leader, 1 unit of 5 Mandrakes, 3 units of 5 Scourges that all have 4 Dark Lances and 1 Shard Carbine, and then 2 Venoms with the Splinter Cannons. The Venoms are going to be housing both of the Incubi units as well as both of the Archons, while the Raider is going to be holding both of the units of Kabalite Warriors. The Scourges aren't going to be able to go into the transports at all, but they are going to be able to move around the board very, very quickly. And the Mandrakes being able to redeploy every single turn is great. At 2,000 points, what we're going to be doing is just picking up 1 box of Venom, and then we're going to be picking up Lilith Hesperax. Important to note is that the Venoms are very similar to the Raiders. They have extra witches who are hanging off the boat. We're not going to be putting the witches on any of the Venoms. Instead, we're going to be having the Venoms be a closed top, and the witches are going to be off to the side. You'll have to pick up some bases for them, but we're going to wind up having 12 witches off of these 3 Venoms. With all of these pieces together, we're going to have Lilith, we're going to have 1 Archon with no enhancement, 1 Archon with the Nightmare Shroud, 2 units of the Kabalite Warriors, 1 10-man Witch unit. We're going to be having the 2 Incubi. Both of the Mandrakes are going to be down. All of the Scourges are going to be out with their Dark Lances. The Ravagers, Raiders, Venom, it's all going to be the same. The big thing to note is that Lilith and the Witches are going to be going in one of the Raiders. The Incubi with the Archons instead are going to be going into the Venoms. The Lilith Witch Squad is going to hit like an absolute freight train. Between the series of buffs that you're going to be able to give to them, coming out of a transport, the Witches and Lilith are going to be able to reroll hits, fight first, have +1 to wound, +1 strength. They're going to be AP -4 on Lilith and AP -3 on the Witches, meaning that these things can take out almost any unit that you really want in the game, and it's not going to cost you a lot of points to do it. And you're probably just going to get that pain token back immediately anyways. The one thing that's going to be a little awkward here is the 3rd Venom. Now, that's because we don't have a 3rd Incubi squad, which means we don't have a 3rd good 5-man squad to go with them. What we're going to wind up doing is kind of wasting one of the Mandrakes just a little bit. Instead of it being able to infiltrate and be kind of a forward deploy, 1 Mandrake unit is going to be going into the 3rd Venom. They're going to be getting out of the Venom immediately, so you don't really need to worry about that too much, and they're going to be able to use their redeploy every single turn after that, especially if you go first. And just having the extra Venom on the table is not too bad. You might be able to have one of your units be able to jump into this Venom, or even just have this Venom go sit on a point and try to capture an objective for a cheap body. But it is just the smallest little bit awkward. On the other hand, if you want to go down the 3 combat patrol route, this is where we're going to pick up that 3rd combat patrol at 1,500 points, and we're just going to save all the other purchases for the 2,000 point bracket. This style is going to leave us with 2 Archons with blast pistols and no enhancements, 1 Archon with a blast pistol and the Nightmare Shroud, 4 units of the Kabalite Warriors, 3 5-man Incubi with the Demiclaves on the leader, the 3 Ravagers, and the 3 Raiders. It's going to be very simple. You have a lot of redundancy. You don't have a lot of cool different options that you can do, but you are going to be able to play fairly effectively. The one big problem that you might have here is if you have each Archon leading an Incubi unit, then you can't actually fit all of the Incubis in the transports, as they only have a carry capacity of 11. This means that you are going to probably be able to have 1, maybe 2 of the Archons leading Incubi, but that third Incubi is almost certainly going to be having to lead one of the Kabalite Warriors inside one of the Raiders. This means that the Kabalite with the Archon is going to be going in one of the designated Raiders. The 6-man Incubi with the Archon is going to be going in a second Raider. The 5-man Incubi with no leader is going to go into that same second Raider. And then with the third Raider, you can either put in the second unit with the Incubi and the Archon, or you can put in a Kabalite unit. At 2,000 points, we're just going to do something kind of similar to what we saw on the previous list. We're going to be picking up Lilith, we're going to be picking up a box of Witches, and we're going to be picking up 1 box of Scourge. Because we have the third Raider, it's going to be pretty easy to fit most of the things that we really want to go into transports in the transports. Lilith and Witches are going to be going in 1. We're going to be having the 6-man and the 5-man Incubi squads go in the second, and we're going to be having the Kabalite unit that's going to have an Archon go in the third. This does mean that we are going to have a sad and unfortunate number of units walking around, which is why I think this list might be a little bit weaker than the previous one, but it is going to save you quite a little bit of money, and you're going to be able to have a full army of Kabalite Warriors, which is not nothing. It's pretty nice. It's also going to give you the 3 Ravagers with Dark Lances, which is also a very good boon. And that's going to round out everything that I have for you today. The Drukhari as an army, if you aren't using the combat patrol, can get very out of hand very quickly with their cost. But as long as you're doing a good job of kit bashing, maximizing the resources that you're given, and buying these combat patrols, you can save quite a bit of money with them. Because of this very nice, friendly intro to the army, despite their cost later down the line, I'm going to be putting them in that $600 to $750 tier, right behind Thousand Suns and ahead of Chaos Space Marines. And that is everything I have for you today. If you enjoyed the video, please consider doing all the YouTube pleasantries. If you want to help support the content so that I can continue to put out videos, consider becoming a member on YouTube or supporting me over on Ko-fi. Supporters receive things like early videos, shoutouts, heavier weight on their votes for community polls for what content I do next, as well as one-on-one help with building up their lists. Thank you all, and I will see you in the next video.